Hey friends, so in today's video we're talking about the realities of the raw food diet. We wanted to emphasize this on this video because there are lot of misinformation, a lot of myth and incorrect information that people follow on the internet or from other sources, and then they fall off the wagon, or they go back to eating cooked food, and they don't understand why it didn't work for them. So, Don, would you like to expand more on that?
Okay, sure. But first things first, I always like to start out each of these talks by reminding people, in case this is the only one of these talks that you, the viewer, see, you need to just have very clear in your mind how healthy do you want to be. If it's on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the healthiest that your genetics will allow you to be, you have to decide if you want to be a 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, whatever you want to be. Because if you want to be 10, well, it makes things pretty straightforward. It makes them pretty simple. Not necessarily easy at the beginning, but it does make it simple. There aren't a whole number of different diets you can choose from. You have to eat the diet that you're designed to eat, that the human beings are designed to eat. You have to get enough sunshine, enough deep sleep, enough hydration, enough exercise without getting too much. So it's pretty straightforward what you have to do if you want to be a 10. If you want to be at level 5, whoa, you've got so many more options now. You can eat just about any diet. And if you want to be at level 4, well, now you can eat as much food of whatever diet you're eating. Okay, so you get the idea. So as you start watching this video, if you decide you want to be a 10, that'll help you, um, better take on the things that we're going to be talking about. Now, let's talk about some of these realities of the raw food diet. And remember, the definition of reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, it doesn't go away. It's always going to be there. And you have to remember, there are a lot of people out there who you probably know who live in kind of a fantasy world. They think that, something's going to happen. If they wish for it, they'll get it, and or whatever. Or they can eat or they can smoke cigarettes and they're not going to get lung cancer. They're living in a fantasy world. Their mind is not living in reality, but their body exists in reality. Your body exists in reality. So it'd be good if your thinking processes existed in reality too. Okay, so let's take some of these myths and memes that are out there. If you've ever heard, quote, "I eat the raw food diet." Well, there isn't just one raw food diet. There isn't the raw food diet. It'd be correct to say, "I eat a raw food diet," or "I eat the healthiest of the raw food diets." Okay, because there are quite a number of them. There's the high carb, low fat raw food diet. There's the high fat, low carb raw food diet. There's the gourmet raw food diet. There's even an animal raw food diet. Okay, so that's not a vegan raw food diet, but there are people who eat raw animal food, RAF. I won't even spend any time on there because they might as well just also smoke cigarettes and drink a quart of scotch every day, as far as their health is concerned. But they think they're doing the right thing. And the reason why, by the way, they eat a raw animal food diet is because they know that cooking is bad. So they understand that the concept that cooking damages food, it damages fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, but they just are under the impression that we do need to eat animal products, and that's an incorrect impression. Number 2, quote, have any of you heard this? Quote, "As long as you're eating a diet of fruits and vegetables, you don't have to worry about nutrition." Now, this quote comes from a very popular raw food diet educator, someone who's written books and gives lots of lectures and teaches classes. But and it's a lovely notion. As long as you're eating a diet of fruits and vegetables, you don't have to be concerned about your nutrition. That's lovely, but it's incorrect. And we're able to prove it's incorrect. It's not a theory. It's not a hypothesis. It's now been shown that this is incorrect. You do have to be concerned about nutrition. And you'll see this in one of the next quotes that we're going to talk about. So this is one to be very, very careful of. And it's a lovely notion that you shouldn't have to buy any supplements. You shouldn't need supplements. And yes, you didn't need any supplements 100,000 years ago. And good thing, because there weren't any available. But if you want to be as healthy as you can possibly be, you need to get enough of all the nutrients your body is designed to have. Enough of all. You can't have enough of some, and you can't have some of all. You have to have enough of all. It just stands to reason. There's no options there. And the thing is, if you start not getting enough, if you're on a diet that gets enough of all, and you switch to a diet where now you are not getting enough of all, it could take 20 years before you get a diagnosis of something life-threatening because of the change that you made. It's not going to be something instantaneous like hitting your thumb with a hammer. I mean, you'll know you did a bad thing if you hit your thumb with a hammer instantly. You won't have to wait years to find out. That's the difference between acute and chronic conditions. Okay, so you start depriving your body of certain nutrients. Again, for example, you go from a typical Western diet, which has a lot of nutrients fortified into the diet, into the foods that you're eating. Now you go to a pure vegan raw food diet, which has no fortification. There's nothing added to the foods. Now you could come up lacking in certain nutrients. So, contrary to what this popular raw food educator says, you do have to be concerned that you're getting enough of all. Here's another quote. Quote, every species on the planet can get all the nutrition they need without supplements. Why should we be any different? Unquote. Now, if you think about it, as again, lovely notion, if you're trying to look for reasons not to buy supplements, you might say, well, yeah, all the other animals don't take supplements, so why should we have to?
Right.
But if you think about it and you're unbiased, okay, and you're not going to let yourself think according to your personal preferences and how you'd rather life be, you're going to say, well, that's just a stupid statement, because the other animals are getting their food from a totally different system than we're getting our food from. They're getting it from the wild. They can sniff around and get the best, the highest nutritional quality foods. That's why you see an animal sniffing different foods, different items of the same food. Well, why didn't you eat that one? That one looked good. It looked ripe. They can tell from smell which is the most nutritious. We don't really have that ability. So we have to rely on other things. But where human beings, let me ask the question to the people who are watching this right now. Raise your hand if you're growing all of your own food in really good soil. Anybody out? I don't see anyone raising their hand. No, no one's raising their hand. So you're most likely getting your food or most of your food from an agri-based food industry. And they grow for a lot of reasons, but not nutritional quality. They grow for yield, appearance, size, shelf life, pest resistance, growth rate, sugar content, but they do not grow for nutritional content. Why? The government isn't forcing them to, and the consumers aren't demanding it. So why should they? It would cost them more money to do it. Okay, so two very different sources of food for the other animals that live out in the wild and for us. Number 3, quote, this is a quote from someone who teaches people how to teach people to do a raw food diet. So this person's really smart. This person is going to charge $1,200 to take her class, and she tells you, don't worry about that. You'll make that $1,200 back in a few months. And then everything after that is pure profit. And I'm going to teach you how to teach other people to eat a raw food diet, how to do a raw food diet. So here's her quote in her advertising. Quote, teach people how to become healthy and vibrant by eating a raw food diet where you can eat burgers and pizza and pasta and cookies and cakes and pies every day, and you never have to count calories, protein, fats, or carbs. Unquote.
Sounds good.
Well, sounds great. That sounds great. That's fantastic. But you can eat at McDonald's for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you never have to count calories, protein, fat, or carbs. But it's probably a good idea that you do, because you'll be mortified by what you find out. So again, she's selling a bill of goods, and I've spoken to people who've taken her class and then hung out a shingle and started teaching, and they come to me crying saying, I've been totally ripped off because I tried teaching, and people started asking me questions during Q&A. I couldn't answer their questions, and these were questions I really should have been able to answer, and I wasn't taught these things in that $1,200 6-week class. So again, you have to be very careful of these ripoffs that are out there. Yeah. Okay, here's another one. Quote, you can be just as healthy eating a high raw diet as you can eating an all raw diet, unquote. I don't know if any of you have heard this particular meme. You can be equally as healthy eating a diet that contains cooked food in it as you can eating a diet of all raw food. Now, anyone who's studied even a little bit about what cooking food does to the food and then what it does to you would say, really? But also you kind of want to believe this, because this would allow you to still eat some cooked food. Now you can eat with your friends and your family, and they're not going to make fun of you and blah, blah, blah. Now, where did this come from? Well, it actually is a transitioning tactic. When you're going from a typical Western diet to an all-raw diet, it's not good to go overnight. That can be too overwhelming on your body, on your liver. Mm-hmm. So you start out with baby steps. You make the first meal of the day an all-raw meal. So the first meal of the day, which some people call breakfast, I don't believe in naming my meals. I just eat a meal whenever I'm hungry. So some people, they will start out by eating the first meal of the day all raw, just fruit. just fruit. And that's for a lot of people, that's huge because they were eating bacon and eggs and bagels and cream cheese and all that other stuff. And so that's huge for them. Do that and then get comfortable with it. Okay. Then make the second meal of the day. Second meal of the day, all raw. Some people call that lunch. Okay, that's cool. And then, so you're still eating the third meal of the day, the last meal of the day, as a cooked meal, whatever you want to eat. But it's part of a transitioning tactic. And when you get comfortable with the first and second meals, it could take a year, could take 2 years. Then you knock out that last meal and make that an all raw meal also, instead of doing it all in one. Now, what people have found out, what marketeers have found out, people who want to make money and be popular and successful money wise, is that yeah, people can do that first and second meal all raw as long as they can do that last meal cooked. That they can do. But to try and get them to do all raw, jump into that last meal of the day all raw also, like quickly, that's really tough. But people can stick with that first two meals of the day, like being all raw until about, you know, 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock.
Hmm.
So all raw until 4 o'clock or something like that, and then go to town, eat whatever you want. Hopefully it's vegan at the last meal of the day also, right? And people can be a lot more successful with that. But again, if you want to be at the number a 10, at level 10 of how healthy you can be, that's not going to do that if you eat like a all raw until the last meal of the day type program for the rest of your life. Not going to get there. Oh, you'll be higher than the general public. If the general public's between 5 and 6, you'll be between 7 or 8. But being 7 or 8, now you still have odds of getting a diagnosis of something serious later down the road. Maybe
Right.
further on down the road than your next door neighbor, but still, I don't know about anyone else, but I never want to get a diagnosis of something life threatening. I never want to go through that. I've seen people who have. I don't want it. And if I can avoid it by respecting my body and living according to nature, to my nature, to human beings' nature, I'm going to do it. It's a good investment. People talk about investing for the future finances.
Hmm.
Invest for your future health first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And
So,
I could really just something to add. I could really tell the difference between like eating high raw and fully raw. I could see difference in my skin, in my energy levels. A lot of things changed when I transitioned to fully raw vegan.
right.
Yeah. So.
What a lot of people report, and I've been counseling people for about 15 years now. What a lot of people report is when they start making small changes and they go from, 50-50 raw cooked to 60-40, and they're making more raw. There's a 10%, increase in raw,
Yeah.
and they feel about 10% better. Then they go to 70-30, they go to 80-20, they go to 90-10, and they're feeling about 10% better.
Yeah.
You can't really put a number on it. But when they go from 90-10 to 100% raw, it doesn't feel like that 10% improvement that they had been experiencing, those 10% improvements, it feels like a billion% improvement.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and once you experience that and you get through the detox, that's another thing. If you do these transitions slowly, you can get through the detox, hopefully, by the time you get to 90-10. So then you can really feel that going from 90-10 to 100% without there being any further detox. And you can
Hmm.
really feel that 1 billion% improvement.
Exactly.
Right. So that whole thing with you can be just as healthy eating some cooked food as eating no cooked food, no, it isn't true. And it should cast a red flag on a program that people are saying that and allowing that meme to go around. All right, here's another one. Again, this is from that same very popular, well, used to be very popular raw food educator who said, if you're eating fruits and vegetables, you don't have to be concerned about nutrition. He says, quote, if you think you're experiencing symptoms of a B12 deficiency, by all means, take some B12, unquote. Now, that might seem like a very prudent thing to do, but this is very bad advice. Number one, what if what you were experiencing, those symptoms, really weren't from a B12 deficiency, but you self-diagnosed and you really don't know exactly what you're doing,
Hmm.
so you just thought it was B12. Well, now you're going to start taking some B12 and give it time to see if it goes away. But since it wasn't from a B12 deficiency, you're just allowing it to continue, the problem to continue because you're not really going down the right road to deal with it.
Right.
So what about testing? I might say if you think you're experiencing symptoms of a B12 deficiency, by all means, take a B12 test. But this other gentleman doesn't do that. He just says, yeah, take some B12, see if it works. If it doesn't, we have we have some very good tests out there. There's certain things that really can't be tested for. They don't have good tests for, like chromium or magnesium, but there are other ways to deal with that. But for B12 and D and iodine and a few others, there are some very good tests. We're very lucky. So there is a very good test for B12. It's called the UMMA test, and I'll put that. I'll give that to you to put in a link down below. Also, an article on B12.
Yeah.
So you would do that test, and that test will tell you conclusively if you have a B12 deficiency or you don't. Then you can do something about it. Now, if you really think it's a B12 deficiency, it won't harm you to do the test. Then after you do the test, start taking some B12 because you could take a week for the test results to come back. Okay, that would be prudent. But again, that's not what these educators are saying. And some educators say, look, again, you don't have to worry about you won't get any deficiencies at all. But again, B12 is not supposed to come from food in the first place. So when you go to an unfortified diet, a diet of unfortified foods, because B12 is sprayed onto cereal as the cereal goes into the box. So if you're eating processed products like cereal, that's where the B12 is coming from. But it's not in fruits and vegetables to any degree that's meaningful to your body. Your body is supposed to make it, but a lot of people either don't make it or don't make enough. Again, that we've spoken about that before, that whole supply and demand issue. Okay, so that was another myth. Let's see. Another good one is, tell me if you've heard this, that it's impossible to not get enough protein or fat on a raw food diet.
Yeah.
Have you heard that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. As long as you don't cook what you're eating, it's impossible to not get enough protein or fat. You're going to get enough. Don't worry about it. Well, in my practice, I've seen people who have bumped up against an omega-3 fatty acid deficiency or a protein deficiency. You have to remember, protein is made up of a whole bunch of amino acids. So they bumped up against one amino acid deficiency. And, it's just like you have certain essential amino acids and certain essential fatty acids. Essential means you have to have them. There is no choice. There are no options. You must have them, and you must have enough of them. Now, how does this happen? How do some raw foodists get enough fat and protein and others don't get enough fat and protein when they're basically eating the exact same foods? Think about that. They're eating the exact same foods. They're identical twins, and one is getting enough fat and protein, and one is bumping up against an omega-3 fatty acid deficiency. How could that possibly be?
Well, it depends on calories.
There you go. You hit the nail on the head.
And the
We're,
type of fats and stuff like that they eat.
we're supposed to be this active. That's what that's what we would be and would have been 100,000 years ago. Now, for this active, we'll be eating this much food to supply our caloric requirements. And with this much food comes an appropriate amount of little bits of fat and protein that our body needs.
Right.
And again, our bodies don't use fat and protein for fuel. It uses carbohydrates for fuel. But it does need fat and protein for various other processes. Okay, so this is the amount of activity that this is quote unquote designed to do. Now, what if in today's day and age, you're doing this? You're sedentary. It's easy to be sedentary in today's day and age. It was impossible 100,000 years ago. Today, it's so easy to be sedentary. You can, get up and sit down at your breakfast table. Get up, sit down in your car. Get up and sit down in your office for 8 hours. Get up, sit down back in your car. So you're sitting all day. You're hardly doing any walking around. You're taking elevators. It's easy to be sedentary. So if you're not being this active, you'll still eat an appropriate amount of food for your caloric requirement, because you don't want to be overweight. If you ate this much food and were this active, you become overweight. So you don't do that. You eat according to hunger, but now you're only eating this much food and you're getting less fat and protein, which don't correlate with calories, don't correlate with your carbohydrate needs. So that's why you can bump up against a omega-3 fatty acid deficiency, just because you're not being active enough. So there is that correlation between exercise and diet that a lot of practitioners don't talk about, they don't know about, they don't think to mention it. So that's very important to know about. One last one, quote, "Many raw foodists go back to eating an animal and grain-based diet," unquote. Well, I wouldn't say many, I would say some. And there's a reason for it. If you do it successfully, a raw food diet, you're going to feel so great eventually that no amount of money in the world could pay you to go back, because you're going to feel so good, and your problems are going to go away. Now that's a biggie. If problems go away, you're never going back to a
Hmm.
diet that allowed those problems to happen in the first place.
Exactly.
But why do some people fail to thrive on a raw food diet? There are 16 basic reasons that I've uh, put together. And give you a link to put at the bottom of this video where people can watch a little 10-minute video that'll talk about those 16 reasons why people fail to thrive. But again, if you're not getting enough of all, the nutrients your body requires, that's a biggie. If you're not getting enough deep sleep, if you're not getting enough sunshine for vitamin D, D sulfate, and cholesterol sulfate, the sun makes more than just vitamin D in your skin. Now, raise your hand if you've ever heard that before from a practitioner that was giving a lecture. I don't see any hands going up. A lot of people don't know about it. And now they're starting to find out that it isn't so much the vitamin D which helps your immune system, it's the D sulfate. Now, D sulfate comes from the sun shining on your skin, but it's not in the vitamin D supplement. Not yet. Maybe 10 years from now, everything will catch up and they'll put it in.
Yeah.
But it's not there now. So that underscores the importance of getting enough sunshine or the equivalent of sunshine from one of those phototherapy devices, the light boxes. Um, Okay, so there are reasons why people go back. And, look, if you go from a diet of fortified foods to a diet of unfortified foods, the fruits and vegetables, and you start going downhill after a few years, and you go back to the diet of fortified foods, and again, you're not even understanding that it's the fortification that's helping you here, and you start feeling better, you might say, okay, your conclusion will be, I guess I'm not designed for a raw food diet, and I have to eat meat and grains like the chiropractor was telling me. And it wasn't that at all. It's just that the meat and grain diet that you're eating had fortified nutrients in it that you were lacking in the fruit and vegetable diet. So there's just it's an easy fix. And now it allows you to eat a vegan diet, which is what we're designed for. So there are always reasons why people fail to thrive. Physiological reasons. There can be some psychological reasons too. Look, you could be doing everything right. You could be eating really nutritious food. You're adding the green powder, but socially, you're being an outcast now. None of your friends want to have you as a friend anymore. Your family doesn't invite you over anymore. So, and that's tough. That can be very tough for some people. They would rather sacrifice their physical health to have good emotional health. But
Right.
there are ways to have both. You can lose the friends you need losing and make new friends on the way.
Yeah.
uh,
Absolutely.
you can't change your family, but with enough good friends, yeah, you can. Okay, so let me give you now some recommendations. Don't let biases or personal preferences color your judgment. And when I talk about biases and personal preferences, I'm talking about yours and those of someone who is teaching you or that you're learning from. Okay. So those biases and personal preferences can really get in our way. Other animal species aren't bothered by that. They don't have the brain capacity to have biases and preferences and to disbelieve what's true and to believe what isn't true. They can't do that. They're stuck dealing with reality, and good for them. But we have the ability to believe what we'd rather believe rather than what's true, etc. So you have to be very careful about that. If you want to be a number 10, if you want to be a 4 or a 5, believe anything you want, doesn't matter. Okay, I recommend do not follow one educator, myself
Hmm.
included, doesn't matter. So those watching, don't just follow me, don't just follow Savan. Take a multi-source education approach to your learning about health.
Yeah.
You actually want to bump into conflicting information. That may sound counterintuitive, but you do want to find the conflicting information because if you're looking for the truth, if you find conflicting information, one of them is probably true, one of them is probably false. So that's why you want to find the conflicting information in case what you're following is the false information. One of the best things I can recommend when learning about something is learn it as a researcher and not a student. Okay, students tend not to question what they're taught. They may ask a question of clarification, but they're not going to question the basic premises that their instructor is teaching. They're just going to accept it. But a researcher questions everything. It's nothing personal. Researchers just question everything. They don't assume that what they're discovering is true. So they're
Yeah.
going to question everything, and that's why they take a multi-source approach to education. Another piece of advice is don't be discouraged when you come upon conflicting information. As I just said, be glad. That's all researchers are glad if someone can prove them wrong.
Hmm.
Okay, if a researcher says, okay, this is it, I think I got it, and someone says, no, you're wrong, and here's why. The researcher doesn't get all pissed off. The researcher says, oh, good, thank you. Thank you for sure, because the researcher wants to learn the truth, know the truth, and teach the truth. Okay, so as far as reality is concerned, the best thing I can say is to set up as an ideal the facing of reality as honestly and as cheerfully as possible, because you're going to bump up against some aspects of reality which are going to tend to put a frown on your face. Try to turn that frown upside down, as they say. So just deal with reality as cheerfully as possible. And remember, the most popular information is not necessarily the most correct information. That's a biggie. What can do you great harm is what you believe to be true that isn't. So again, I mentioned that video earlier. It has at the end of it the 16 reasons why people fail on a raw food diet. Siobhan, you're going to put that link down below. Normally I sell that, but for you guys watching this series, that's for you for free. And it goes into those 16 reasons.